In this video, I'm going to share with you 7 powerful things that EFT tapping can do for you to help you transform the quality of your life and allow you to unleash your potential, along with the actual research studies that are proving this technique to be an absolute must. There's a reason why doctors, psychologists, celebrities, personal growth experts, and so many others are raving about this technique. And by the end of this video, I think you'll want to incorporate it into your lifestyle as well. Hi, welcome back to the channel. I'm Alex Ortner, co-founder of the Tapping Solution app, an app that guides you using the science-backed EFT tapping technique to balance your nervous system, rewire your brain, reduce stress, anxiety, overwhelm, and so much more, so that you can sleep better, get motivated, get healthy, get happy, and improve your life in all ways. If you're new to tapping, make sure to click the new to tapping video in the description after you watch this video. I have to say that I am so excited about what I'm going to share with you today because I know that EFT tapping can absolutely transform the quality of your life. And the science and research behind this technique is quite frankly astounding. These 7 areas that we're going to cover today all involve things that are essential for being physically and mentally healthy and for having a brain that allows us to live our lives in the way we want. And unfortunately, these things aren't really optional for us anymore. In the same way that 50 years ago, we didn't talk about the importance of eating well and exercising because we all generally moved more and had less stagnant lives and ate less processed foods, so it just wasn't as needed. We now absolutely have to find ways to reset our nervous system, to rewire our brains to overcome fears and traumas and limitations, and to turn off the amygdala in the brain, the constant fight or flight stress response that we have. The reality is that our brains and our nervous systems are facing challenges that they've never had to face before. And so in the same way that without exercising and eating well, we gain weight and develop health challenges like heart disease, without tools like EFT tapping, we become overwhelmed by life. We limit our brain potential and our ability to be resilient diminishes. So we hold back and become more fearful and more anxious, and we then look back at the dreams we had when we were young and go, what happened? I wanted to be so much more. But before I get into that, I want you to ask yourself about those dreams. What were the dreams you had for yourself when you were 10, 15, or 20 years old? And are you living the life you dreamed of? If you're able to go back in time and show the 10-year-old, 15-year-old, or 20-year-old version of you how you're living today, would you be proud to show them your life today? Would you be proud and be saying, check this out, look at who you become, look at the life you get to live? Or would you feel that you didn't live up to who you wanted to become? Now, I'm not asking this question for you to feel bad about any aspects of your life. The reality is that the 10, 15, or 20-year-old versions of ourselves could have never foreseen the challenges that come with adulthood. The stress of work, a career or business, paying the bills, relationships, having a family, or any of those other things. And none of us could have foreseen just how fast our society would speed up. The non-stop world of information is just not the way it was years ago. The reason I ask this question is simply for you to take a moment to reflect. Because it's my belief that if your life is not where you want it to be, that it's because you had a lot of challenges come up that you, like so many of us, were not equipped for at the time. But it's also my belief that you have far more potential inside of you than you realize. And that no matter how off course you feel, or how much you have already succeeded, that your limits are far greater than you realize today. So as we go through these 7 powerful things that the science and research is showing about EFT tapping and what it can do, and also why these 7 things are essential for all of us to be doing today, I ask that you open up to the possibility that you're just beginning to become your best self. I'm only going to share 1 or 2 research studies for each of the 7 areas we'll cover in this video, but there are over 300 peer-reviewed studies on the effectiveness of tapping. So get ready, strap yourself in, and let's explore EFT tapping, and more importantly, a future version of you that 1 month, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years from now, you would be so proud to show the current version of you. So the first area we're going to talk about is sleep. We're starting here because sleep is the foundation of our physical and mental health. We spend about 1/3 of our lives sleeping. But when sleep is impacted, it impacts our mental and physical health. And decades of research have linked chronic sleep deprivation to an increased risk for obesity, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and problems with immune function. Sleeping less than or more than the recommended, typically about 7 to 9 hours a night, is a significant predictor of death by any cause. Sleep issues also hinder social, motor, and cognitive skills and predict suicide risk, depression, and other mental health problems. It's estimated that 50 to 70 million Americans chronically suffer from sleep disorders. That's just in the US. The data and research clearly show that sleep matters. And even beyond the research, I know that you know, and I know that when we don't sleep well, we can't think as well and work as well, and we make poor food decisions and have little motivation to exercise, and we're all kind of grumpy and not as nice, right? All of us are better people when we sleep. Our dreams and aspirations simply just go out the window when we don't sleep well. So your ability to show up as your best self every day is severely limited when your sleep quality is low. And even if you sleep okay, my question to you would be, can you sleep better? Could you have more restful sleep where you wake up more energized? So let's talk about tapping and sleep and what the research is showing. In one study, participants all with poor sleep quality used tapping, and by the end of the study, the vast majority of the participants, 73%, changed from having poor sleep quality to officially having good sleep quality. And I actually think the results could have been much higher because all they did in the study was 4 60-minute group sessions of tapping. This did not involve nightly tapping meditations like the ones we have in the Tapping Solution app that are just so effective for releasing the stress of the day, calming the racing mind, and impacting the hormones that keep us awake or allow us to sleep. There are numerous studies showing the effectiveness of using EFT tapping to improve sleep, and I'll get into the mechanisms of why the tapping helps with sleep in just a minute, but I want to jump to number 2 on our list first. The second area that EFT tapping is so effective with is stress and anxiety. And this is an area where very often people go, yeah, stress relief, I'm fine, I have stress and I handle it, and you're not going to make me stress less or not going to make my stress go away. And they're right, but they're misunderstanding the goal. The goal is not to have no stress. That's just simply not realistic. It's just not going to happen. And research actually shows that there are benefits to certain levels of stress. The challenge we have in our modern non-stop society is getting stuck in chronic stress because it doesn't allow our nervous system to reset. As my friend Dr. Mark Hyman, a 10 times New York Times bestselling author, says, there are 3 things critical to our health: eating well, moving our body, and resetting our nervous system. So let's take a quick moment to understand what that means. Our nervous system is always either in the parasympathetic response, otherwise known as the rest and digest response, or in the sympathetic response, otherwise known as the stress response. In rest and digest, our bodies go into healing and rejuvenating. It's just what it sounds like. Our bodies calm down, we're able to relax and sleep, energy goes towards digesting and repairing and growing and all that good stuff. That's the mode that tapping switches on, which I'll share the research on in just a minute. What it does, it actually turns off that stress response and turns on the relaxation response, which is what we want. So when you think about stress in your life, I recommend that you not necessarily think about how stressed you are, but how often your nervous system is in the rest and digest response. So if you have a stressful thing come up or a stressful day, are you able to then let go at the end of the day, or does the stress continue into the evening and into the night? And the bigger challenge is the accumulation of stressful things that keep us in the stress response. So worrying about work, our health, our kids, feeling constantly behind, constantly overwhelmed, and constantly getting information day and night, such as news and what's going on in the world and social media, where we compare ourselves to others, all these nonstop things that keep us in that stress response. And most of the time, we don't realize how much we carry until we're about 3 days into a vacation, maybe once a year if we're lucky, and we go, oh wow, I'm finally breathing and relaxing, right? Have you ever had that happen? So if you ask yourself right now, what are you stressed about? You can probably answer that pretty easily, right? And how often are you really relaxing and allowing your nervous system to go into the rest and digest? Because in rest and digest, in that state, is when our bodies conserve energy to be used later, and it regulates our bodily functions like digestion, urination, our endocrine system, our heart rate, our vascular system, our lungs, our breathing. It even affects the function of our gallbladder, pancreas, and kidneys. The list literally goes on and on. So can you see how important it is to think about stress, not necessarily in terms of how much stress you're dealing with, although that is important, of course, but more so in terms of how well and how often you're allowing your nervous system to go into the rest and digest mode, the parasympathetic nervous system response. Make sense? If you exercise to take care of your health, you also need to reset your nervous system for your health. It's no longer an optional thing for us because our world moves so fast. I know I'm spending a lot of time here, but it's really important to understand this because this nervous system response is important for all the things we'll talk about today. It affects sleep, which is number one, and you'll see it affects the other things we'll go through as well. And we'll talk about the brain as well in a few minutes, and you'll also get to hear about gene expression. Super cool. You're going to love that. Okay, so let's talk about the science in research with EFT tapping that is showing how incredibly effective it is in quickly turning off the stress response. So this is a tool that in your busy life you can use to quickly shift your nervous system, which, as we know, is really important, right? In a landmark study in 2012 with Dr. Dawson Church that was then later reproduced and confirmed in 2020 with Dr. Petta Stapleton, they looked to see how EFT tapping influences the stress hormone known as cortisol. So high cortisol levels are associated with weight gain, insulin resistance, impaired immune function, bone density loss, muscle weakness, digestive problems, heart disease, sleep disturbances, hormonal imbalances, skin and hair problems, and reduced growth hormone and thyroid function. It's a lot, right? So in both these studies, they measured cortisol in the saliva, and they broke the participants into 3 groups. One that would do EFT tapping, one that would do psychoeducation, and one that would do nothing. And what's really interesting is that in the 2020 study, they had them reading magazines, right? And you'll see why that's interesting in a minute. So there were 50 minutes of treatment in each group. The group that read magazines had a 2% increase in cortisol. The group that did psychoeducation had a decrease of cortisol of 19%, so they improved. But the group that did EFT tapping had a decrease of 43% in those same 50 minutes. So cortisol went down at more than twice the rate of psychoeducation. But the reality is in our lives, what we're really doing is the equivalent of what the first group did, reading the magazines, or worse, right? Because we watch the news or go on social media and have things that cause us more stress. But when you take the time to do the tapping, your cortisol levels, essentially your stress levels, go down significantly. To give you an idea of how fast it can go down, in our Tapping Solution app with our Release Anxiety Tapping Meditation, which has been played over 1 million times, it's actually our most popular tapping meditation, the average reduction in anxiety as reported by users in the app is 41%. So in the app, users measure anxiety at the beginning on a scale of 0 to 10, and then at the end on a scale of 0 to 10 as well. And the average reduction is 41%. With the Release Stress Tapping Meditation, it's a reduction of 42%. Amazing, right? And let me share a really funny story about the first time that Dawson did this study. After he completed the test, Dawson was getting super frustrated because he kept not hearing back on the final results. And when they finally let him know the results, they apologized for the delay. They said that the levels of cortisol had dropped so much in their testing that they thought something was wrong. So they went back and they did it again. But when they got the same results, they realized that it was just the tapping was working. So going back to how this impacts you, because that's why we're here, right? The way it impacts you. If you know, and I know how important it is to regulate our nervous system and go into that rest and digest state using EFT tapping, especially with how busy all of our lives are, tapping is the fastest and easiest way for us to move our nervous system from the fight or flight response to the rest and digest response. It can literally be done in just minutes. And the impact is huge. As we just said, it impacts sleep, our weight, our digestion, all these things. And the research shows that it works, right? When it comes to stress and anxiety, I could literally list study after study that shows its effectiveness, but I just shared one in this video. If you want to see more of them, go to the research area on our website. Okay, so area number 3, where EFT tapping can transform your life, food cravings, and weight loss. So, do you ever struggle with food cravings? Do you ever struggle with food choices and look at a salad or a slice of pizza or French fries or cake and go, I'm going with the pizza, right? We've all had this happen, right? This is a really fascinating area when it comes to the research with EFT tapping because there are brain scans showing how the brain changes with the tapping. It's amazing. In a study in Queensland, Australia, Dr. Petta Stapleton broke participants into two groups. In each of those groups, participants had an fMRI brain scan while they were looking at a food that they craved. And the scans showed the brain lighting up to show the cravings. You could see it in the scans. One of the groups then went through a 4-week EFT tapping treatment. At the end of the 4 weeks, all the participants again did a brain scan while looking at the same food they craved. In the group that did the tapping, the brain no longer lit up to show the cravings. So in other words, they no longer wanted the food. The tapping process literally rewired the neural pathways of the brain. Incredible, right? And the cool thing is the results lasted. They didn't just go away. And I'm actually going to share a piece of a great little clip from the study when it came out. Check this out.
4-week world first intensive study here at Bond University has just wrapped up, showing participants who tapped certain pressure points for up to 15 minutes every day after looking at pictures of bad food lost that emotional need in their brain to eat it.
They do lose weight because they just lose the desire for that food craving. And not having those foods in their life and not having to use willpower does mean weight loss will occur.
Amazing, right? So when it comes to your life and my life, our food choices really matter. Food can either give us energy and mental clarity, or it can slow us down and lead to weight gain and other health challenges. But when we use EFT tapping, we can make those choices so much easier for ourselves because we've all been conditioned in our brains through our childhood and TV and so many things to like certain foods that we know that we should really eat less of. And that makes those choices really difficult. But when we do the tapping, it rewires those neural pathways and makes those choices so much easier. Imagine for a moment your favorite food that you love, that you'd like to eat less of. Imagine that in your mind. You're probably, just as you think about it, salivating already, right? Because that gets triggered immediately. Imagine not wanting that as much. And if your reaction is, don't take this away from me, that's your current programming kicking in. But if you want to live your best life with the health and the energy and the longevity to be there for those you love, better food choices, where it's easy to make those food choices, will give you more of what you want. So the study I just mentioned was just one of many studies on EFT tapping in food and weight loss. If you want to read more of them, click on the link below or go to the research area on our website. So area number 4, physical pain. Now, I've been doing tapping for nearly 20 years, and I've had the fortune of seeing the transformation, literally in just minutes, of so many people in pain. I've seen people who couldn't raise their arm above their shoulders for 5 years be able to raise their arm and their hand all the way up in the air for the first time. I've seen people with back problems be able to touch their toes for the first time in a decade. I've seen people who walked with a cane not need a cane anymore. And all of these changes in pain levels and mobility were because they were using EFT tapping. Now, you may have physical pain in your body right now, or you may not. But either way, just think for a moment how limiting it can be to be in pain. The American Association of Physicists in Medicine has stated that people in physical pain report being depressed 77% of the time. 70% have trouble concentrating. 74% say energy levels are impacted. 86% report an inability to sleep well. It's a really huge impact. I don't have chronic pain, but I've twisted my ankles and torn my MCL and fractured my elbow and been unable to turn my neck because of pain. And yeah, those were all sports injuries in my case. But in each of those cases, I couldn't work properly. I couldn't think properly. I couldn't help my wife parent our kids properly. I couldn't just be me. For those of you with chronic pain, I don't have to tell you how limiting physical pain is on your ability to just be you and live your life the way you want. So let me talk about the mind-blowing research with tapping and physical pain. Like I said, I've seen the transformations over 20 years of doing this work, but the latest science and research really highlights just how effective it is. And if pain isn't an issue for you right now, it may be at some time in the future, so listen in. One study found that people who participated in a 4-day EFT training workshop experienced a 57% reduction in pain levels. And let me actually share a quick clip here of people from a pain relief event that we actually ran. Check this out.
My neck pain usually is somewhere between a 7 and a 10. It was gone.
Right at this particular moment, my pain levels are almost negligible.
When I was sitting on stage, my pain was at an 8. When I got off stage, my pain was at a 1.
Now I would say my back today is probably between a 4 and a 5. The only time I've been between a 4 and a 5 is when I was stuck in bed for 2 weeks with pneumonia and I never moved. And then of course I felt great because gravity wasn't a part of my life.
There's nothing. I might have a couple of tight muscles, but it's not pain. And notably, when I got up this morning here, climbed out of bed, and I usually move my neck and work it around until it limbers up, and it was limber when I woke up.
Amazing, right? And there are a number of studies on tapping and pain relief. Again, to read more of them, click on the link below. So area number 5 where EFT tapping can transform the quality of your life is with resolving trauma. Now, all of us have dealt with different levels of trauma in our lives. Trauma can be seemingly small one-off events like speaking up in a class in 3rd grade and having kids laugh at you, so you become scared to ever speak in front of people again. Or it can be a large one-off event such as a bomb exploding on the battlefield. Or it can be complex PTSD such as childhood physical, verbal, or sexual abuse where there is an ongoing lack of safety for years. There are lots and lots and lots of different big and small traumas that we can experience, and each of them has a different level of impact on our lives. But what is clear is that the deeply emotional and psychological scars of trauma can haunt us for years, shaping our perceptions, behaviors, and quality of life, and limiting our ability to just be ourselves and feel safe showing up in the world. If you think about your life, what events or experiences have you had that made you close down and hold a piece of yourself back, that led you to believe that you aren't worthy of love, or that you're not smart, or that you can't be successful or manage money or be in a relationship? There are so many small and big traumas in all of our lives that hold us back from creating the life we want. And while these past events can shape us, they do not define us. But here's the good news. This is one of the most studied areas in tapping research, and one that we are extremely passionate about here at the Tapping Solution. In fact, with the Tapping Solution Foundation, we've helped people with some of the most challenging traumas, such as genocide survivors in Rwanda, war veterans, survivors of school shootings, and so many others, all with tapping. So let me share the research. In one study, a group of veterans with PTSD did 6 weeks of tapping. After just 6 weeks, 90% of the participants no longer met the criteria for having PTSD. And here's the really crazy part about this study. For the group that received standard care, only 4% no longer met the criteria for PTSD, which means that 96% of that group remained clinically diagnosable with PTSD. That's 90% with EFT tapping compared to 4% with standard care. That is life-altering. Think about that for just a moment. When you think about all the veterans in the US and around the world, when you think about the civilians who have had their lives affected by war, imagine 90% of them no longer having PTSD. Imagine the amount of healing that could occur in the world with this simple technique. So I want to take a minute here to explain why tapping is so effective with trauma and how it is rewiring the reactions we have in the brain and body. When we have something happen that our brain believes to be unsafe, the amygdala in the brain fires. The amygdala is a part of the limbic system, and it's the fight, flight, or freeze response in the brain. So if we think about our ancestors thousands of years ago, and let's imagine one of them was walking in the middle of the day and all of a sudden it saw the tall grass move in a certain way. And so the amygdala was instantly triggered. And when that amygdala was triggered, the ability to use glucose for immediate energy was raised. And the heart rate went up in preparation to leap into action. And other non-essential things like digestion, repairing muscles, and growing, those things were deactivated, like we talked about earlier. There was an overall heightened sense of awareness so that if it was realized that the tall grass moving was a tiger, for example, then he or she could leap into action, hopefully with some friends around to help, or it could immediately run as fast as possible, or it could freeze and stay hidden, or fake being dead if it was under attack to try to get the predator to just go away. Now, imagine we didn't have that response back then, and the tiger jumps out and we're completely unprepared. We die, right? So we, of course, through evolution, we developed the fight or flight response in the amygdala in the brain for survival. The problem today, as we talked about a bit earlier, is that the fight or flight response is constantly triggered with things that are not actually life or death, that are not a tiger in the grass. Now, it can just be an email from your boss, or a look that someone gave you, or someone cutting you off in traffic, or a million other things. And so that part of our brain stays activated way too often. But what the science and research shows about tapping is that when we tap on these specific meridian points of the body, it sends a calming signal to the amygdala of the brain, letting it know that it's safe and it can relax. And that is why EFT tapping is so effective with trauma when other things are not. Think about this in your own life. What triggers you? What things that happen or people or life events trigger you? It can be things like when you have to pay the bills, or when you think about your health, or worry about your loved ones, or that colleague at work that drives you a little bit crazy. Or it might be when you want to take action on your business or career, but you're just deathly afraid and you don't know why. Whenever we want to move forward in our lives, but we feel stuck, there are traumas and limiting beliefs that we develop through life events that often keep us stuck, and we don't even know why. So often we just blame ourselves and say, there must be something wrong with me. But let me set the record straight. There is nothing wrong with you or any of us. We are all a product of our life circumstances. And if events have led you to where you are and you're not happy, or you just have that feeling inside that you are meant for more, but you don't know how to get there, EFT tapping is what can get you there by helping you to release and move past these traumas and beliefs about the world and the limitations that we have that keep us from being our full selves. What I want so deeply for you, which I said at the beginning of this video, is for you to realize that what you are capable of is much, much more than you realize. If war veterans with trauma can no longer have PTSD because of tapping, when normal treatment works at a rate of 4%, imagine what is possible in your life. Okay, so let's keep moving. We have 2 more things to cover, and I think number 7 might be my favorite, but we're not there yet. Hopefully by now you're seeing just how passionate I am about EFT tapping and how it can help you to transform the quality of your life, and how the science and research is showing this technique to be an absolute must in your toolbox. So number 6 is mental health. About 1 in 8 US adults now takes an antidepressant, and 1 in 5 has recently received some kind of mental health care. And more recently, from 2019 to 2022, use of mental health services jumped by almost 40% among millions of US adults with commercial insurance. Suicide rates have risen by about 30% since 2000. Almost a third of US adults now report symptoms of either depression or anxiety, which is about 3 times as much as it was in 2019. Isn't that crazy? As of late 2022, just 31% of US adults considered their mental health excellent, which is down 43% from 2 decades earlier. There's a line I read in a Time article that I think really illustrates the problems we're facing, and it reads this. Some experts, however, believe the issue goes deeper than inadequate access, down to the very foundations of modern psychiatry. As they see it, the issue isn't only that demand is outpacing supply, it's that the supply was never very good to begin with, leaning on therapies and medications that only skim the surface of a vast ocean of need. When I read this, I was like, yes, we have outdated therapies. That article from Time, I'll actually link to it in the notes below, because it talks about some things that I don't feel comfortable covering here, such as the effectiveness, or should I say ineffectiveness, of some of the antidepressants. Their words, not mine. So go check that out later. Really, really fascinating. Another thing that it said that I really loved is a medication might help with symptoms, but it can't overcome the basic facts of someone's life, whether they're incarcerated, going through a divorce, being bullied at school, dealing with discrimination, or struggling with loneliness. Again, their words, not mine. Make sure to read the disclaimer under this video. And remember to never change medication without first consulting your healthcare provider. Really important. But I'm sharing that information because this is where tapping is changing the game, because it's not a Band-Aid. It allows you to address the reality of your life right now, which includes the realities of your past and how it's affecting you, and the anxieties you have about the future. Tapping allows you to take the charge off of those events and be in the rest and digest state, even with all the challenges you're facing. It also allows you to access the full resources of your brain. What I didn't mention a minute ago about the amygdala firing is that when it fires, we're less able to access the prefrontal cortex of the brain. This is the modern part of the brain where we make decisions and can analyze the future impacts of our decisions. Really, the easiest way, the easiest example to show you the impact of this is to think for a moment about a time in your life when you prepared for something that you had to do in front of other people, like in a classroom or a meeting at work. And you studied and practiced, and then all of a sudden you got into that situation and you froze. And you thought to yourself, why can't I remember this stuff? I studied. Well, what happened is the amygdala fired and you weren't as able to recall that information. So when we use EFT tapping, we're able to, as I keep saying, actually be our full selves. Because I'm not trying to change who you are. I want to show you a path forward to becoming who you are fully. So let's jump into the science and research. And I already talked about some of the research on anxiety earlier. So here I want to mention research on tapping and depression. In one study with postmenopausal women with mild to moderate depression, they split the women into two groups, one that did EFT tapping and one that actually did sham tapping. So in other words, they tapped on fake points, but they didn't know it. This study is really, really cool because it shows that the points matter. So after 8 weeks of tapping in the EFT tapping group, the frequency of moderate depression went from 56.8% to 9.35%. In the control group, the sham tapping group, it went from 50% to only 30%. So there was an impact that could be just placebo or could be impacted by just the therapeutic environment of what they were doing. But what was clear was that the tapping on these specific points mattered hugely. So this study not only showed the effectiveness of tapping with depression, but also showed that the actual tapping points matter, that the tapping itself actually makes a really big difference. Another study on depression took 238 first-year college students and assessed them for moderate to severe depression using the Beck Depression Inventory, which we'll call BDI here for simplicity. And that group of 30 students was assigned either 4 90-minute group sessions of EFT tapping, or in the control group, no treatment at all. The results were that 3 weeks after treatment, when they were tested again, the EFT tapping group went from an average BDI of 23.44 to 6.08, which was the non-depressed range. Amazing. The control group started with an average BDI of 20.33 and only went down to 18.04 BDI. The control group lowered by 2 points. The EFT tapping group lowered by 17 points. That's huge. That's a huge difference. The tapping brought people from depressed to non-depressed in those situations. And these were college kids. I mean, how amazing is that? That's our youth. So here I shared 2 studies on depression, but can you see how impactful the tapping is on our mental health? Can you see how when we tap, your sleep can improve, your time in rest and digest can improve, your stress and anxiety can go down, physical pain can be reduced, you can lose weight, release years of trauma, the list goes on, right? Okay, so number 7, we're finally here. This one is so cool. EFT tapping can change your gene expression. You heard that right. Research shows that tapping can positively affect over 70 genes implicated in overall health. To give a little background, it's estimated that humans have between 20,000 and 25,000 genes, but only a fraction of our genes are ever turned on in any given cell at any given time. Each cell's function is determined by which genes are turned on, when they are turned on, and how strongly they are turned on. When a gene is expressed, it is considered to be turned on. When it is turned on, the genetic code for that gene is read. That allows the instructions in our DNA to be converted into a functional product like a protein. On the other hand, when a gene is not expressed, it is turned off, and nothing is made from that section of DNA instructions. Gene expression refers to the process in which our genes are either turned on or turned off. Different factors in our bodies and in our environment can affect gene expression, including hormone levels, temperature, diet, stress, lifestyle habits, and so much more. So let's talk about the research here. 2 studies reveal the positive effects of tapping on gene expressions. The first study was published in 2016. In this study, researcher Marjorie Maharaj used a technique called salivary mRNA testing to do a genome-wide analysis in hopes of detecting changes in the gene expression after just a single 50-minute EFT tapping session. The EFT tapping treatment was compared to a placebo effect. This was a small study involving only 4 adults. Saliva from each of the participants was taken immediately before the tapping treatment and then immediately afterwards, and also 24 hours afterwards. After analyzing the samples, the author found that 72 genes revealed differential expression, meaning the way the genes were expressed had changed from before to after the tapping session. 25 of those 72 genes were also differentially expressed 24 hours after treatment. The fascinating part is that the genes that were affected by tapping are known to be linked to immunity, inflammation, neuronal processing in the brain, and stress regulation. Tapping appeared to affect these genes in a very favorable way. For example, genes involved in immunity were upregulated, while genes involved in inflammation were downregulated. This study was the first of its kind to suggest that tapping may positively influence our health through changes in how our genes are expressed. So cool, right? Another study on the topic was conducted in 2018 by Dr. Dawson Church and colleagues. In this study, the researchers took a group of 16 veterans with PTSD symptoms. Half the participants were randomly assigned to a control group, and the other half received 10-hour-long sessions of EFT tapping. Before and after the study, the researchers analyzed the levels of mRNA for 93 genes thought to be related to PTSD. The results of the study showed that in the group who did EFT tapping, 6 genes changed significantly in how they were expressed from before to after. Again, genes associated with inflammation appear to be turned down, and genes associated with immunity appear to be turned up. On top of these findings, the researchers also found that the veterans experience improvements in their mental health systems as well. Both of these studies are groundbreaking and provide very, very compelling evidence that tapping has profound impacts on our body, even affecting how our genes are expressed. So, as I promised at the beginning of this video, I went over 7 powerful things that EFT tapping can do for you to help transform the quality of your life and allow you to unleash your potential, along with the actual research studies. And hopefully you agree with me that this technique is an absolute must. Remember, 50 years ago, life moved a lot slower. We more naturally went from the stress response to the rest and digest response in our nervous system. Our amygdala more naturally was triggered and then relaxed. But that's just not the case today, which is why we have more sleep issues, higher levels of stress and anxiety, more mental health challenges, and so much more. Using EFT tapping is a secret weapon that you can use to rebalance yourself whenever you need it. And as I'm sure you know, we all need it pretty frequently, right? And as the science and research shows, it not only works, but it works fast. If you're new to tapping, remember to go download the Tapping Solution app in the App Store or Google Play. We have over 600 tapping meditations in the app, as well as different challenges and audiobooks and all sorts of great, amazing stuff. Just click the link in the description to access the app right now. As I'm recording this, there are over 17,000 reviews in the App Store with a 4.8 out of 5 star rating and over 10,000 reviews in Google Play. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to bookmark it, like it, leave me your comments, share it with others, and remember to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, keep tapping.